The morning fog rolled across San Francisco Bay as Dr. Michael Rodriguez stepped off the BART train at the Montgomery Street station, his mind already racing with the implications of the phone call that had woken him at 5 in the morning. As the lead atmospheric physicist at the Ames Research Center in Mountain View, he thought he had seen everything the scientific world could throw at him, but nothing had prepared him for what he was about to discover about his former colleague, Dr. Sarah Chen. Sarah had been the brightest star in NASA's Atmospheric Sciences Division before her disappearance 6 years ago. At 34, she held 2 PhDs from MIT, one in astrophysics and another in atmospheric chemistry, and had revolutionized the study of solar-wind interactions with Earth's magnetosphere. Her auburn hair was always pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her green eyes sparkled with an intensity that captivated everyone when she discussed her research into auroral phenomena and their effects on global communications. The NASA Ames Research Center, nestled in the heart of Silicon Valley, had been Sarah's second home for nearly a decade. The sprawling complex of wind tunnels, laboratories, and office buildings housed some of the most advanced atmospheric research equipment in the world. Sarah had spent countless 18-hour days in Building 245, where she developed her groundbreaking magnetometer array called ARIA, Atmospheric Resonance and Ionospheric Analysis System. ARIA represented 7 years of Sarah's life work, a sophisticated network of sensors capable of detecting the most minute variations in Earth's magnetic field and correlating them with solar activity. The device, roughly the size of a large suitcase and weighing 45 pounds, incorporated quantum sensors that Sarah had helped develop in collaboration with researchers at Stanford and Berkeley. It was the most sensitive portable magnetometer ever created, capable of measurements that pushed the boundaries of what was considered scientifically possible. In December 2018, Sarah received an unexpected invitation from the Arctic Research Consortium to participate in a groundbreaking expedition to study magnetic anomalies in the Canadian Arctic. The mission was part of a larger international effort to understand how climate change was affecting the Earth's magnetic field in polar regions, and Sarah's ARIA system was crucial to the success of the research. Dr. James Peterson, director of the Atmospheric Sciences Division at Ames, remembered vividly the conversation in his corner office when Sarah requested permission to join the expedition. Her excitement was palpable as she explained how ARIA could provide unprecedented data about magnetic field variations in one of the most remote and scientifically significant regions on Earth. The opportunity to test her life's work in such extreme conditions was irresistible to someone of Sarah's scientific curiosity and ambition. The weather that winter had been exceptionally harsh, even by Arctic standards. Sarah left California on December 20th, promising her parents in Portland, Oregon that she would be back for New Year's Eve. Her mother, Linda Chen, a retired high school physics teacher, couldn't hide her worry about her daughter traveling to such a dangerous place during the worst winter weather in decades. Her father, David, an engineer at Intel, had tried to convince her to postpone the expedition, but he knew Sarah was as stubborn as she was brilliant. The research team was an international collaboration led by Dr. Marcus Anderson, a renowned glaciologist from the University of Stockholm, who had been studying Arctic climate change for over 20 years. The base camp was located approximately 80 miles north of Resolute Bay in Nunavut, Canada, in an area known for its unpredictable weather patterns and extreme isolation from civilization. Sarah arrived at the research station on December 23rd, after a grueling journey that included flights to Edmonton, Yellowknife, and finally Resolute Bay, followed by a treacherous helicopter ride to the camp. The Arctic cold hit her like a physical blow when she stepped out of the helicopter, with temperatures already reaching -45 degrees Fahrenheit and winds that cut through even the best Arctic gear like knives through paper. The first week of research exceeded all expectations. ARIA functioned flawlessly in the extreme conditions, recording magnetic field variations that challenged existing theories about polar magnetism. Sarah sent daily reports back to Ames, describing phenomena that seemed to suggest the presence of previously unknown magnetic anomalies deep beneath the Arctic ice sheet. In one of her last detailed transmissions to the Ames Research Center, Sarah described detecting what appeared to be artificial electromagnetic signals emanating from somewhere beneath the ice. Her voice, slightly distorted by atmospheric interference, carried a mixture of excitement and bewilderment as she explained that ARIA was picking up patterns that seemed too regular and sophisticated to be natural phenomena. On January 2, 2019, weather conditions deteriorated dramatically. A massive Arctic storm system swept across the region, bringing winds exceeding 90 miles per hour and visibility near zero. Dr. Anderson made the decision to suspend all outdoor activities and ordered the team to shelter in the reinforced modules that served as their temporary laboratory and living quarters. When the storm finally subsided on January 4th, the team discovered that Sarah was missing. Her sleeping module was empty, and Arya was nowhere to be found. The initial assumption was that she had ventured outside during the storm to check on her equipment and had become disoriented in the whiteout conditions. Search and rescue operations began immediately, but the extreme weather made the work dangerous and often impossible. The search effort involved teams from the Canadian Coast Guard, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and volunteer Arctic rescue specialists from across North America. Helicopters, snowmobiles, and trained search dogs combed the frozen landscape for any sign of Sarah or her equipment, but the fresh snowfall from the storm had obliterated any tracks she might have left. Sarah's parents flew to Canada in late January, accompanied by a representative from the U.S. State Department. Linda Chen spent sleepless nights in a hotel room in Resolute Bay, staring out at the endless white landscape and trying to imagine what had happened to her daughter. David worked tirelessly with the search coordinators, analyzing weather patterns and terrain maps, hoping to find some clue that the professional searchers had missed. Dr. Anderson explained to the grieving family that the Arctic was unforgiving and unpredictable. Many experienced researchers had been lost over the years in similar circumstances, and the extreme nature of the Arctic environment made survival almost impossible for someone caught outside in a major storm. Even with proper Arctic survival gear, a person could survive only hours in those conditions without shelter. The official search was called off at the end of February 2019. The Canadian authorities issued a statement expressing their condolences for the loss of Dr. Chen and acknowledging that despite extraordinary efforts by multiple rescue teams, the harsh Arctic conditions had made it impossible to locate her. The case was classified as a presumed death due to exposure, and Sarah's family returned to the United States with broken hearts and unanswered questions. NASA held a memorial service in the main auditorium at Ames Research Center, where colleagues and students gathered to honor Sarah's contributions to atmospheric science and her pioneering work in magnetosphere research. Dr. Peterson delivered a moving eulogy that highlighted Sarah's dedication to pushing the boundaries of human knowledge and her belief that scientific discovery was worth almost any risk. For the Chen family, the years that followed were marked by a persistent sense of incompleteness and lingering questions about what had really happened to their daughter. Linda retired early from teaching and spent much of her time reading Sarah's published papers, trying to understand the passion that had driven her daughter to such remote and dangerous places. David developed an obsession with Arctic research, following every news story about polar expeditions and secretly hoping that someday he would hear something about his daughter. The passage of time did little to ease the pain of loss. Friends and colleagues moved on with their lives, careers advanced. New researchers took over Sarah's projects. But for her parents, time seemed frozen in that January morning when they received the call from Canada. Their house in Portland still contained Sarah's childhood bedroom, exactly as she had left it before heading to MIT, with her amateur telescope still positioned by the window. Michael Rodriguez had been working at Ames for less than 2 years when Sarah disappeared, but her influence on the atmospheric sciences program was still felt throughout the facility. He had taken over much of her research into magnetometer technology, though he never quite achieved the innovative breakthroughs that had made Sarah's work so revolutionary. The laboratory where she had developed Arya remained largely unchanged, a sort of informal memorial to her scientific legacy. On this particular March morning in 2025, Michael was responding to an urgent call from the State Department's Bureau of Arctic Affairs. The previous day, a joint Canadian-American research team studying ice melt patterns in the same region where Sarah had disappeared had made a discovery that would reopen questions that everyone assumed would remain forever unanswered. The federal building in downtown San Francisco was bustling with early morning activity as Michael made his way to the secure conference room on the 15th floor. Waiting for him were officials from multiple agencies, including representatives from NASA headquarters, the State Department, and the Canadian Embassy. The atmosphere in the room was tense and charged with anticipation. Dr. Catherine Williams from the State Department's Arctic Division was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who had coordinated international research agreements in polar regions for over 2 decades. She explained that Canadian researchers studying the accelerated ice melt due to climate change had discovered objects emerging from ice formations that had been solid and undisturbed for years. The first item recovered was a piece of electronic equipment with clear NASA markings and serial numbers that matched components of Sarah's area system. The discovery had been reported immediately to Canadian authorities, who contacted the U.S. State Department due to the international implications of finding American research equipment in Canadian Arctic territory. Michael felt his heart rate increase as Dr. Williams showed him photographs of the recovered items. The images showed metal and plastic components embedded in ice, but the distinctive design elements and NASA identification markings were unmistakable. These were definitely pieces of ARIA, the revolutionary magnetometer that Sarah had spent years perfecting, and that had vanished with her into the Arctic wilderness. The discovery raised immediate questions about what had happened during Sarah's final days in the Arctic. The location where the equipment was found was approximately 12 miles from the research camp, where she had been staying, in a direction that suggested she had been traveling deliberately rather than wandering aimlessly in a storm. The distribution pattern of the components indicated that ARIA had been broken apart, either by natural forces or through some kind of violent incident. Michael agreed immediately to travel to Canada to examine and identify the recovered components. As the person most familiar with ARIA's technical specifications, and the only remaining member of Sarah's research team at Ames, he was uniquely qualified to determine the authenticity of the equipment and possibly extract any data that might have survived 6 years in the Arctic ice. 3 days later, Michael found himself on a charter flight from Edmonton to Resolute Bay, following the same route that Sarah had taken on her final journey. The vast emptiness of the Canadian Arctic stretched endlessly below the small aircraft, an endless expanse of white that seemed to swallow human presence without a trace. It was easy to understand how someone could disappear completely in such an environment. The recovery site was accessible only by helicopter, and Michael spent the flight studying detailed maps of the area and trying to understand how Sarah might have ended up so far from the research station. The terrain was relatively flat, with occasional ridges and ice formations that could provide some shelter from wind, but overall, it was an exposed and hostile environment that offered little protection from Arctic storms. Dr. Rebecca Morrison, the Canadian glaciologist leading the recovery operation, met Michael at the site with a mixture of scientific excitement and somber recognition of the tragedy that had brought them together. She had been following Sarah's work for years and considered her a pioneer in the field of Arctic atmospheric research. The recovery of ARIA represented both a scientific opportunity and a chance to perhaps provide some closure for Sarah's family. The excavation site was protected by a large heated tent that allowed the team to work on the ice extraction process without being exposed to the full force of Arctic weather. Michael watched in fascination as the Canadian team used specialized heating equipment and precision tools to carefully extract each component of ARIA from the ice that had preserved it for 6 years. The first major component they recovered was ARIA's central processing unit, the heart of the magnetometer system that contained all of the device's most sophisticated sensors and data storage capabilities. The unit was damaged but appeared to be structurally intact, raising the possibility that at least some of the data Sarah had collected during her final days might still be recoverable. As more components emerged from the ice, Michael began to piece together what might have happened to ARIA in its final moments. The damage patterns were consistent with extreme mechanical stress, possibly from a fall or impact, but there were also signs of exposure to intense heat that didn't match the Arctic environment. Some of the electronic components showed evidence of electrical overload, as if the system had been subjected to a massive electromagnetic pulse. The most puzzling discovery came when the team uncovered a device that clearly didn't belong to ARIA or to any standard Arctic research equipment. It was a compact communication device with Cyrillic markings and what appeared to be military-grade encryption hardware. The device was more advanced than typical research communication equipment and seemed designed for covert operations rather than scientific collaboration. Michael didn't recognize the device, but its presence in the same ice formation as ARIA suggested that Sarah might have encountered other researchers or personnel in her final days. The fact that the device was Russian-made added an international dimension to the mystery that complicated an already complex situation. Dr. Morrison explained that the ice analysis indicated that all of the recovered objects had been frozen at approximately the same time, suggesting that whatever had happened to Sarah and her equipment had occurred during a single incident rather than over an extended period. The age of the ice corresponded exactly with the time frame of Sarah's disappearance. confirming that these were indeed remnants from January 2019. The recovery of the mysterious Russian communication device raised questions about Sarah's final days that went far beyond a simple case of a researcher getting lost in a storm. The presence of advanced military communication equipment suggested the possibility that she had encountered personnel who were not part of the official international Arctic research community. Michael spent 3 days at the recovery site, carefully cataloging and analyzing each component as it was extracted from the ice. The meticulous work was complicated by the need to preserve any data that might still be stored in Aria's memory systems, while also documenting the condition and position of each piece as it was found. The return journey to California was made more complex by the international implications of transporting what might be sensitive equipment across borders. The Russian communication device required special handling and diplomatic coordination, while Aria's components needed to be preserved in controlled conditions to maximize the chances of data recovery. Back at Ames Research Center, Michael assembled a team of specialists to attempt the delicate process of extracting data from Aria's damaged memory systems. The work required cleanroom conditions and specialized equipment designed to recover information from electronics that had been subjected to extreme conditions. Every fragment of recoverable data could potentially provide insight into Sarah's final scientific observations and possibly explain what had happened to her. The first breakthrough came when the team successfully accessed Aria's backup memory system, which had been designed to operate independently of the main data storage in case of system failures. The backup system contained compressed data files from Sarah's final week of research, including measurements that had never been transmitted back to the research station. Sarah's final recorded observations revealed the discovery of extraordinary magnetic anomalies that defied conventional understanding of Arctic geophysics. The data showed electromagnetic signatures that appeared to be artificial rather than natural, with patterns suggesting the presence of advanced technology operating beneath the Arctic ice. The measurements were so unusual that Sarah had begun documenting them as a potential breakthrough in the understanding of human impact on polar magnetic fields. In her last data log entry, recorded just hours before her disappearance, Sarah noted that she had detected what appeared to be a large underground installation generating powerful electromagnetic fields. The readings were unlike anything in the scientific literature, suggesting technology far more advanced than anything known to be operating in the Arctic region. The personal audio logs recovered from Aria's memory provided the most emotional and revealing insights into Sarah's final days. Her voice, preserved in digital format despite 6 years in the ice, carried a mixture of scientific excitement and growing concern about what she was discovering. She spoke about plans to investigate the source of the mysterious electromagnetic signals, despite the approaching storm, and the potential dangers of leaving the research camp. In her final audio log, recorded at 3 a.m. on January 3rd, Sarah described her decision to take Aria on what she called a reconnaissance mission to locate the source of the electromagnetic anomalies. She mentioned leaving a detailed note for the research team explaining her intentions and planned route, though no such note was ever found in her quarters at the research station. The data recovery also revealed communication logs showing that Aria had detected and recorded encrypted radio transmissions in the hours before Sarah's disappearance. The transmissions were in Russian and appeared to originate from a location approximately 15 miles northeast of the research camp, in the general direction where Sarah's equipment had been found. Analysis of the Russian communication device found with Aria provided additional pieces of the puzzle. The device contained transmission logs showing intensive encrypted communication activity during the same time period when Sarah had disappeared. The timestamps indicated that the Russian communication system had been active for several hours on the night of January 3rd, with the final transmission marked with what appeared to be an emergency code. Dr. Peterson contacted the State Department to explore the possibility of obtaining official information from Russian authorities about any research activities that might have been taking place in the Canadian Arctic in early 2019. The response came after weeks of diplomatic negotiations and was both informative and frustratingly incomplete. The Russian government confirmed that a team of geophysical researchers from the Moscow Institute of Atmospheric Physics had been conducting legitimate scientific research in the Arctic region during the time period in question. However, they declined to provide specific details about the nature of the research or about any contact that might have occurred with other research teams in the area. The Russian response was carefully worded to acknowledge the presence of their researchers while avoiding any admission of involvement in Sarah's disappearance. They emphasized that all Arctic research conducted by Russian teams followed international protocols, and that any suggestion of impropriety was unfounded and potentially damaging to scientific cooperation in polar regions. The diplomatic stonewalling forced the investigation to focus on the physical evidence and data recovered from the ice. Michael worked with intelligence analysts from multiple agencies to piece together a timeline of events that could explain how Sarah's equipment and the Russian communication device ended up buried together in the Arctic ice. The emerging picture suggested that Sarah had successfully located what appeared to be an undisclosed Russian research installation and had possibly made contact with the personnel there. The nature of that contact remained unclear, but the damage patterns on area and the emergency communication logs suggested that the encounter had not been entirely peaceful. Geophysical analysis of the area where the equipment was found revealed evidence of significant excavation activity that had occurred around the time of Sarah's disappearance. Satellite imagery from 2019 showed temporary structures and vehicle tracks in the area that were not present in earlier photos and had been removed by the time of later satellite passes. The satellite evidence supported the theory that Sarah had discovered a temporary Russian research installation that was much more sophisticated than the official scientific mission that Russian authorities had acknowledged. The rapid removal of the installation after Sarah's disappearance suggested that her discovery had compromised some kind of classified or sensitive operation. Reconstructing Sarah's final hours based on all available evidence painted a picture of a brilliant scientist whose curiosity had led her into a situation far more dangerous than a simple Arctic research expedition. Her decision to investigate the mysterious electromagnetic readings had brought her into contact with personnel conducting covert research that they were willing to protect at any cost. The question of what had happened to Sarah herself remained the most painful mystery for her family. The recovery of area and the Russian communication device confirmed that she had encountered the covert installation, but provided no direct evidence about her fate. The absence of any human remains in the ice suggested either that her body had been removed or that she had somehow survived the initial encounter. Linda and David Chen faced the heartbreaking task of deciding whether to accept that their daughter had died in whatever incident had destroyed Arya, or to hope that she might still be alive somewhere in Russian custody. The recovery of her equipment provided the first concrete evidence about her final days, but it raised as many questions as it answered. The geopolitical implications of the case began to attract attention from congressional committees and international Arctic research organizations. Sarah's disappearance was no longer seen as an isolated tragedy, but as part of a larger pattern of secrecy and potential conflict over Arctic resources and research territories. NASA initiated its own internal investigation into the security protocols for researchers working in politically sensitive areas. Sarah's case highlighted the vulnerability of American scientists working in remote locations where the presence of foreign military or intelligence operations could pose unexpected dangers. The Chen family decided to go public with the new evidence about Sarah's disappearance, hoping that international attention might pressure Russian authorities to provide more complete information about what had happened. Their story was picked up by major news networks and sparked broader discussions about scientific freedom and safety in contested Arctic territories. Michael Rodriguez found himself thrust into the role of spokesman for the scientific community's concerns about researcher safety in polar regions. His analysis of Arya's recovered data became the foundation for arguments that international protocols for Arctic research needed to be strengthened to prevent future tragedies. The technological insights recovered from Arya also had significant implications for ongoing research into Arctic magnetic phenomena. Sarah's final measurements provided evidence of electromagnetic anomalies that could revolutionize understanding of how human activities were affecting polar magnetic fields, but the circumstances of their discovery cast a shadow over their scientific value. Dr. Peterson established a memorial research fund in Sarah's name, dedicated to advancing the understanding of Arctic atmospheric physics while ensuring the safety of researchers working in remote and potentially dangerous locations. The fund supported the development of new safety protocols and communication systems for polar research expeditions. The mystery of Sarah's disappearance evolved from a personal tragedy into a symbol of the complex challenges facing modern scientific research in an increasingly militarized and politically sensitive Arctic region. Her story became a cautionary tale about the unexpected dangers that could confront researchers whose work intersected with national security interests. As the first anniversary of the equipment recovery approached, Michael continued to analyze the data that Sarah had died trying to collect. Every measurement and observation she had recorded in her final hours contributed to a growing understanding of Arctic magnetic phenomena, ensuring that her scientific legacy would endure even as questions about her fate remained unanswered. The Arctic ice continued its accelerated melting, potentially revealing more secrets that had been buried for years. Michael and other researchers working in polar regions now approach their work with a heightened awareness that scientific curiosity, while essential for human progress, could sometimes lead to dangerous encounters with forces beyond the realm of pure science. Sarah Chen's name was added to the memorial wall at NASA Ames Research Center, alongside other researchers who had given their lives in the pursuit of knowledge. But unlike most of the others honored there, Sarah's story remained unfinished, a reminder that in the modern world, the search for scientific truth could intersect with mysteries that extended far beyond the laboratory or research station. The legacy of her work lived on in the enhanced safety protocols adopted by Arctic research programs and in the continuing analysis of the unprecedented data she had collected with AREA. Her disappearance had revealed not just the secrets hidden beneath Arctic ice, but also the complex web of national interests and covert activities that could threaten researchers working in the world's most remote and strategically important regions. For her parents, the recovery of AREA represented both a form of closure and the opening of new chapters in their search for truth about their daughter's fate. The scientific community had gained valuable knowledge from Sarah's final research, but the human cost of that knowledge served as a sobering reminder that the pursuit of understanding always carries risks that extend beyond the natural dangers of extreme environments. The Arctic continued to reveal its secrets as climate change accelerated the melting of ice that had preserved evidence for years or decades. Sarah's story became part of a larger narrative about the intersection of scientific discovery, international relations, and the personal courage of researchers willing to venture into the unknown in search of answers to humanity's most pressing questions.